Hey, students, what's up? All right. The first thing you're going to do to start class is a reading accountability quiz. I know you're so excited. You have approximately 12 minutes to complete this quiz. Now, before you whine, realize that that's a little over a minute per question. That's all you need if you went back over chapters 18 through 24 and you're ready for this quiz. If you didn't go back over the chapters, you have no idea what the content is in any of the chapters, then it doesn't matter how much time you have for this quiz. So, 12 minutes, you're on the honor system since I'm not there. Please make sure you are hitting the submit button in about 10 to 12 minutes. And then it is time to revisit this video and we're going to move on with our lesson. All right, good luck on your quiz. Welcome back from your quiz. I hope you did really well. Okay, now that you're done with your quiz, let's move on with our lesson. We're going to look at something kind of cool today. Idioms and allusions that we find all throughout Screwtape letters. What do they mean? Let's find out. All right, please move slide. Okay, there we go. The big idea that we're looking at today is no writing is without deep cultural influence. That's the big idea, right? And think about it. It's true. Nobody's writing, not mine, not yours, and not C.S. Lewis's. No one's writing is without deep cultural influence. The standard we're looking at today is identify the meaning of common idioms, literary and classical allusions in text. So let's do it. The essential questions for today's lesson is, what is some of the cultural influence in Lewis's Screwtape letters? Can you identify the cultural influence in your writing? Think about that. You've got cultural influence all throughout your writing. And then the third question that we're going to really take a look at in the lesson today is, what are some allusions and idioms in Screwtape letters? So let's rock and roll. Students will be able to identify 2 allusions while analyzing and discussing chapters 25 through 31. Remember, you're completing your journals. Chapter 31 is it. So we're about to put Screwtape letters behind us. Oh, that's right. It's a great book. Hopefully, you'll read it again someday. Let's remind ourselves what idioms and allusions are. So an idiom is an expression whose meaning is not predictable from the usual meanings of its constituent elements. Constituent elements, why do they even have to say that? Why don't they just say the words used in the idiom, right? Duh. So anyways, an expression whose meaning is not predictable by the words that are used to make the idiom. So for example, kicking the bucket. We know, most of us do, that means to die. But but if you didn't know that, you just think like, okay, kicking a bucket. Hang one's head. We know that kind of means, they're down, they're sad, they're depressed, they're ashamed or something like that. So these are idioms that we kind of know that are kind of common. So we're going to take a look and see if Screwtape letters has some idioms that maybe aren't so common to our day and age, but probably were during Lewis's time. An allusion. Allusions are a little bit more interesting. A brief and indirect reference to a person, place, thing, or idea of historical, cultural, literary, or political significance. So the cool thing is, Lewis alludes or refers to so many different cultural ideas, things, political issues that were going on during his time period. But if we don't stop to kind of check them out, we miss them. And we miss a lot of meaning in the text, in the context, if we just let these allusions pass us by. Plus, it's kind of cool to look at these allusions because they show us some of the major influences that C.S. Lewis had in his life. So let's take a look at some of these allusions. But first, guess the idioms. Can you guess what idiom is represented by this picture? I bet no one will be able to guess this one. I've actually never heard before of this idiom, but I thought it was so creative, I had to include it. Anybody guess? It has everything to do with the guy holding the flag. I'll just give it to you. The idiom is let your freak flag fly. Try that alliteration 10 times fast. Let your freak flag fly. Let your freak flag. Oh, I can't even do it 2 times fast. Let your freak flag fly. It means to let others see your uniqueness. So if someone's looking a little unique, maybe on International Day, for example, right? You could say, hey, man, they're really letting their freak flag fly. Yeah, you got to be careful with that one. You don't want to insult someone, though. All right, how about this idiom? This should be a little easier for you. It's a wolf, not a dog, and the wolf is crying. Hint, hint. Yeah, that's right. Come on, who's got it? That's right, crying wolf. We usually hear it in the negative. Don't cry wolf. Because we're telling someone, hey, don't call for help unless you really need it. An idiom. Another English idiom here. Can anybody guess this one? That's right. I bet some of you got it. Pull a rabbit out of a hat. It just means to do something really unexpected. How about this idiom? This, by the way, is a gambling chip. If you haven't been to Las Vegas recently or down to the Scenicville Beach, and you haven't frequented a casino lately, you might not recognize this. This is a gambling chip. That should give you a big hint to this idiom. Let the chips fall where they may. It means to let something happen no matter the consequences. How about this idiom? A tooth jumping over a chasm, and it looks like the tooth just barely made it. Does that give you a hint? Yeah, by the skin of your teeth. In other words, you just barely made it. So this idiom refers to some of your graduation status, right? Ha ha ha, just kidding. You're all graduating far better than by the skin of your teeth. All right. Okay, allusions. Let's take a look at allusions, and let's take a look at how they're used in Screwtape letters. Before that, though, we'll see how they're just used in everyday language. So someone might say to you while you're walking down the hallway, don't act like a Romeo in front of her. What are they alluding to? Duh, we all know this, Romeo and Juliet. How about this one? The rise in poverty will unlock the Pandora's box of crimes. Yeah, if you're familiar with the Greek mythological story of beginnings, Pandora, you understand kind of what this allusion is referring to. How about this one? This place is like a Garden of Eden. Well, duh, at Logos, where we have so much biblical studies, we totally get this one, right? It's obviously referring to a perfect place, a beautiful place. How about this one? Hey, guys, hey, guess who the new Newton of our school is, right? We know they're referring to Sir Isaac Newton, right? And so, yay, British literature, right? They're referring to Sir Isaac Newton, the great physicist, the great scientist. And so we know that they're obviously saying that someone is really excelling in science, maybe even specifically physics. So these are just some ways that we use allusions all the time in our everyday speech. How about the title of the last book that we read, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus? So that's an allusion because Shelley is not spelling out exactly what Prometheus means or where she's getting it from. She expects her readers to understand the allusion to the Greek mythological god Prometheus, who supposedly brought life from clay, right, or sand or whatever. And so if we understand that allusion, we kind of get the title, right? If we don't understand the allusion, have no idea what Prometheus is, then we're kind of a little lost on what the heck that title means, right? Okay, yesterday I gave you guys a challenge and a few of you nailed it. It was an allusion in chapter 22 of our book. It says, not that she'd do much good there either, a two-faced little cheat. I know the sort who looks as if she'd faint at the sight of blood and then dies with a smile. I was so excited about this allusion because for me, it reminded me of a very specific person, Perpetua. She is an early church martyr who was known as a fairly prestigious young lady. She came from a family that had money. Her dad begged her to renounce the faith and save her own life. And she was a rich young girl who someone would probably assume would be very sensitive and maybe someone who would seem like they would faint at the sight of blood. But then when it came down to her being in the arena and standing up for Christ and dying for him, it's said, legend has it anyways, that she smiled as the Roman gladiator ran her through with a sword, as she knew she was seconds away from being with her Savior. So obviously a powerful woman. And so I think when Lewis was writing this statement, he was certainly thinking of at least someone just like Perpetua. So kind of a cool illusion, right? Here is an interesting illusion. Check this out. In the preface of Screwtape Letters, when C.S. Lewis is telling us why he wrote this book and how it's kind of fun to sort of make fun of the devil, he says this: the best way to drive out the devil is to jeer and flout him. Well, it turns out that this is a specific allusion or reference to our very own Protestant reformer, the German doctor and monk Martin Luther. In a book he titled Table Talk, he says this: Dr. Luther said that when he couldn't get rid of the devil with holy scripture and serious language, he had often expelled him by tart remarks and crazy jokes. And when he, the devil, tried to burden his conscience, listen to this, he would often tell him, "Devil, I've been doing it in my pants. Have you smelled it and added this to your list of all my sins?" Oh, disgusting, right? Man, what was Martin Luther thinking? And he also would say this. Listen to this in a very mocking tone, as it's obviously meant to be read. Again, he told him, "Oh, my dear devil, should the blood of Christ shed for my sins not have been enough? Please do pray to God for me, for he is a proud spirit and cannot bear scorn." So obviously here, Martin Luther would say like, "Oh, let's see, devil, was Christ's death not enough for me?" In other words, of course it was. "Well, then why don't you say a little prayer for me, devil? Then maybe I'll be okay." So it's obviously mocking the devil when he's tempted. So interesting allusions to Martin Luther. I want you to guess what's the illusion in chapter 3. Now, this one should be a little bit easier for you biblically astute students. So, what's the illusion in chapter 3? Pause the video, open to chapter 3, see if you can nail this illusion, and we'll see if you got it right. All right, pause the video. Okay, welcome back. Were you able to guess the illusion? How many of you guessed Luke 15:25, the story of the prodigal son? Maybe you didn't know the biblical reference, but I bet most of you were able to grab the idea of the prodigal son story. So Screwtape, when he's talking to Wormwood, doesn't give us anything other than the elder brother in the enemy story. He doesn't say it's from the Bible. He doesn't say anything about the cultural backdrop. He just says the elder brother in the enemy story. Now, if you don't have a biblical background, you're probably going to completely miss the meaning of this context. But we, having a biblical background, having had the prodigal son story repeated to us multiple times, we probably got that. And because we understood that illusion, it opened up a whole world of meaning in the context. So see how key it is to really understand illusion. So I want to encourage some of you students, if you are reading through some of these letters in Screwtape Letters and you come across a piece of text that you just don't quite understand what is going on, what they're talking about, likely there's an allusion there to something that was very important or very well known in C.S. Lewis's time. So look it up. Type it into Google and see if you can catch that allusion, and see if once you understand that allusion, it totally opens up the meaning of the text for you. Super important to understand these allusions, especially in some of these older British novels. Let's take a look at this one. This is one of my favorite lines from the end of chapter 8. It says, "When a human, no longer desiring but still intending to do our enemy's will, asks why he has been forsaken and still obeys." I love this. How many of you, right when Lewis uses the word forsaken, or when Screwtape is talking and he uses the word forsaken, how many of you immediately think of the scene where Jesus is on the cross and he calls out to God the Father and says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Right? So Lewis is obviously intending you, the reader, to understand this allusion to that very scene on the cross, while Jesus is on the cross. But there's another allusion that we probably don't understand in our 21st century day and age. Lewis was very much influenced by a Scottish author and minister named George MacDonald. And I know that he was very influenced by George MacDonald because actually there's about a dozen allusions to George MacDonald's works in Screwtape Letters. Here is one of them. This is something that George MacDonald famously said years and years ago. The highest condition of the human will, as distinct, not as separated from God, is when, not seeing God, not seeming to itself to grasp him at all, it yet holds him fast. Well, that's just another way of saying the very thing that Lewis had Screwtape say in the book. When a human, no longer desiring, but still intending to do our enemy's will, asks why he has been forsaken and still obeys. So some of Lewis's earliest readers who understood George MacDonald as he was a prolific figure in Lewis's day and age. Many ministers quoted him. Many Bible studies and Sunday schools used his books and his works. Many of Lewis's early readers, therefore, probably would have picked up on this allusion, and it might have added a little bit of understanding or meaning to the text there. So allusions, they're so interesting and so important as we go through some of these British novels. So here's what I want you to do. I want you, as you finish up your journals and you analyze chapters 25 through 31, I want you to see if you can catch 2 allusions. Now, not 2 per chapter. That would be a little too much. But 2 allusions throughout the set of chapters 25 through 31. See if you can find some interesting allusions. And when you do, make sure you mark what they are in your journal and explain the source of the reference or the allusion. You can also try to catch an idiom if you'd like as well. Okay, now we're going to pause the video here. I want you to pause the video and I want you to get to work. You've probably got about 20 to 25 minutes of good work in your journals. Now, remember, one of the keys to doing this activity is discussion. So have good discussion with your table group. Discuss these questions with each other. What are some of the tactics that are being used in these last few chapters of Screwtape Letters? And how might you counter maneuver some of these tactics? Remember, you're preparing for your project. You're writing this letter from hell. And so pause the video now. Get to work, do a good job, put your hand to the plow. There's an idiom for you. And what I want you to do is I want you to come back and start the video again during the last 5 to 7 minutes of class. And here's why. I've got an idiom challenge for you, and one of you is going to win 2 points extra credit on that quiz that you just took. So come back in the last 5 to 7 minutes of class, hit play on the video, and you'll have a chance to win a couple points extra credit. All right, get to work. All right, welcome back. Are you ready for your idiom challenge? But first, let me remind you of what's coming. So outside class prep here, take a look at the left-hand corner of your screen. Remember, it's your responsibility over the long weekend to make sure you complete your letter from hell, and you all have the rubric. We've taken a look at the rubric. You understand the criteria. You know what's expected of you. Make sure you complete that letter from hell, and then also make sure your journal is ready to be turned in to get a completion grade. Okay, that's your only homework for British literature. I hope that's not too much, along with everything else you have to do. Okay, are you ready for that idiom challenge? Here is the idiom challenge. The first person to locate the idiom in chapter 21 and explain its meaning, don't forget the context will help you there, gets 2 points extra credit. Now, you can look up the idiom once you find it, you can, or think you found the right one, you can look up the idiom on Google to try to get the understanding of it so you can better explain it. You can email me. Don't forget, emails are time stamped. So I'm going to know the first person to email me with the correct answer. So what is the idiom that I'm looking for in chapter 21? What is the idiom that I'm looking for in chapter 21? And what does it mean? The first person to get that email correct to me wins 2 points extra credit. Go. Have a great rest of your day, students, and I'll see you soon.